Before my slides come up, it's really, really important that I say I'm not a lawyer. What I'm about to say is not legal advice. But if you want legal advice, I work with 3 attorneys and we work together to give great legal advice, I hope. So another thing I'll say while the slides are coming up is, I was perhaps kind of an early adopter, an early mover in the space of so-called responsible AI. And I learned several important things. One being that the idea of being responsible with technology is important, obviously, but it's oftentimes difficult for organizations to grapple with. Right? It's abstract, it's complex, it's new, and after having lawyers shut down my products for 4 years in a row, I realized, hey, maybe there's something on the legal side of this, right? And so by starting a law firm, it short circuits some of the difficulties around ethics and these sort of amorphous concepts of responsibility and trustworthiness, because what we're really talking about is legal compliance, which is oftentimes just necessary, right? There's not as many questions to ask. There's not as many arguments to be had. Not that the law is always clear, but it sort of helps. One of the reasons I was really drawn to it is it really kind of jumpstarts you past a lot of philosophical discussions that can be really difficult to have inside of large organizations. So I'm all of this to say, my talk will be called 7 Key Areas of Legal Liability in Artificial Intelligence. And so not only is AI sort of already regulated to various extents in the United States and other places in the world, but there will be more laws coming. And I do sincerely think they'll affect the ways that we all work. So I'm gonna wait for the slides now. But happy to take any questions or anything if people are wondering if they should start an AI law firm or something like that.
Why start an AI law firm, and when was this?
So we started in early 2020, and we lived through the pandemic. I saw the hand back there, and here's why, really, because like I said, I was at this Silicon Valley machine learning firm that some of you may have heard of, H2O, and I think we were doing some pretty unique things in the space. We were in particular making inroads into financial services, which is important, lucrative, highly regulated, and a very common experience in my life was we'd get to the end of the deployment, we'd be ready to deploy, and we'd run into lawyers, and lawyers would say, we mostly what they'd say is, we don't know if this is legal or not, so sorry, you can't do it. They wouldn't say it's illegal, they'd say, we just don't know. We've never heard of this before, we don't know. And my business partner is an attorney, and he was oftentimes the attorney breaking data scientists' hearts. And so he would be sort of the last attorney left standing with the data scientists, and I would be the last data scientist left standing with the attorneys. And after all that heartache, we decided that there must be some real demand for this, and that proved to be true. Did you have a question back there?
Yeah. So any technology you have to respond to. So what's different with AI? Why is there so much emphasis on AI as opposed to say?
Yeah, I'll give you my spiel on that, and I think David Danks, who was just here, would be a better person to answer that question because he's a philosopher. But here's my take on that. So, in the United States, let's say in a democracy, if I have technology that purports to enhance security or purports to enhance privacy, if I implement it well, I'm coming to some kind of positive outcome. I'm making something more secure. I'm making something more private. And in a well-functioning democracy, if that's where we live, hopefully that's done kind of for the common good, or at least for the commercial good. AI is more neutral, right? I can make a really good AI system, a highly accurate AI system that walks down the street and shoots all women or something like that, right? And have it still be accurate. AI is more neutral than privacies like than technologies like privacy and security, at least in the United States, right? Like you can see under an authoritarian government that privacy and security could become very dangerous, but that's sort of my take on it in the context of sort of the US legal system and the US economy. All right, let's see what I can do here. All right, so just again, that says I'm not a lawyer, this isn't legal advice. Can we go to the next slide? I'm not sure if I'm able to. Down. No. All right, here we go. All right, this is good. This is a good place to start. This is the first slide, so that's good. All right, so this is a slide not from my law firm, from a big fancy big law firm, and I just show this to sort of highlight. You know, I never, when I was getting educated as a data scientist, certainly no one told me I needed to worry about laws. And this graphic is about data privacy, not necessarily AI. But I think, you know, there's this myth that what we do as data scientists isn't regulated and the law doesn't apply. And even as of today, that's simply not true. So this is some other big fancy law firm saying that data is actually highly regulated in the United States. And we'll get into this. We'll get into the details here. So let me see if I can do it. Great. All right. So these are the ways that AI is regulated today, and then getting into some of what you can expect in the future. So one thing that's tricky and complicated about the US legal system is that laws are oftentimes vertical specific, meaning that there are very serious regulations about the use of models in banking. There are very serious regulations about bias and fairness in employment. So if you're not working in one of those regulated industries, and you probably know if you were, the main regulator you need to watch out for is the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission. And they essentially look for companies and technologies that are unfair, deceptive, or predatory. And of course, we know people have used AI and machine learning in that way. So to deal with that, they have come up with a new enforcement mechanism, actually, known as an algorithmic disgorgement. And that is when they come in and they make you erase your data and erase your algorithm and sign a bunch of legal paperwork saying that you will not make money from this line of business ever again. They've done that 3 times. They've done it to Weight Watchers, they've done it to Facebook, and they've done it to a photo sharing app called Everalbum. Now, you know, things just get more complicated. Because we don't have sort of an overarching federal regulation even about data privacy in the United States, we just have all these very specific industry laws. States have taken it upon themselves, and cities have taken it upon themselves to start regulating machine learning and AI. So many states, California included, have passed data privacy laws, have passed their own data privacy laws. And these vary from sort of very light touch, you know, just make sure you have some kind of legal basis to use the data, get consent to use the data, to really pretty draconian laws that I don't see how anyone can comply with, and that companies just seem to be praying will go away, but they're not going to go away. So some of the laws have teeth too. I mean, the BIPA in Illinois, the Biometric Information Protection Act in Illinois, they've been successfully suing a number of large companies over breaches of what they would deem illegal use of biometric data. New York City and Washington, D.C., in New York City, it's a passed law. In New York City, any use of algorithms in hiring will now have to be audited by a third party, and you'll have to post the results of the audit to your website. And then Washington, D.C. is about to pass a very strict bias and transparency law for algorithms. So decisions in housing and insurance and employment, in government services will have to be explained to users. and they'll have to be bias tested, and there are pretty serious penalties if you fail to explain your decisions or fail bias tests. There are numerous lawsuits. So just recently, OpenAI and Microsoft were sued over their code generation models. Clearview AI has been the subject of a lot of legal scrutiny over data privacy. Instagram has been sued. CoreLogic has been sued. So people are starting to notice that these AI systems can run afoul of the law, and either regulators are suing, states, attorneys general are suing, or consumers are suing. The thing to watch out the most, so who's heard of GDPR? Okay, so the GDPR of AI is coming, okay? Likely passed next year in 2023. The EU regulators are they know how to write what's called sort of extra jurisdictional regulations. They write regulations that affect companies outside of the EU. They're doing the same game again for AI. And the EU AI Act, it prohibits certain uses of AI, and it deems other uses of AI, again, very similar to the law in DC, insurance, law enforcement, healthcare, government services. It deems uses like that high risk, and they're subject to very high compliance burdens, a lot of documentation, a lot of fairness requirements, a lot of interpretability requirements. Also, we see NIST and ISO developing pretty workable, pretty meaty, pretty serious AI standards. And the NIST work, which I'm actually a grantee on the NIST AI Risk Management Framework, the NIST work came out of that executive order that you talked about. So there are laws already passed in the Congress that say when further laws are passed, refer back to NIST, refer back to the NIST AI Risk Management Framework, which is real. It's on its second draft and to be released in January. Okay, so just to kind of reiterate some of these things. These are quotes from a U.S. federal regulator. You almost never hear language this strong. Threats to consumers arising from data abuse, including those posed by algorithmic harms, are mounting and urgent. It is imperative for the FTC to take all action within its existing authority to protect consumers. These are all from FTC documents about AI. Hold yourself accountable or be ready for the FTC to do it for you. They never say things like that. They define fairness as do more good than harm. To put in the simplest terms, under the FTC Act, a practice is unfair if it causes more harm than good. Okay, so they're saber rattling. They're doing enforcement actions, and it's just something you have to watch out for. And again, what they're most concerned with is bias, unfair, deceptive, and predatory practices. Another thing that I should have put on this slide that's just good advice is they do not want AI impersonating humans. So I don't know how many startups there are that are like, make your chatbots perfectly human. I don't know if they must not know that the FTC has literally said that's a deceptive practice. Okay, here are these local laws in DC, in New York City. I wouldn't be surprised if San Francisco, Chicago, all the sort of big blue cities start passing similar laws. And of course, the propagation of all these state and local laws is going to drive companies crazy, and they're going to, start lobbying for a federal AI law. Okay, here's an example sort of lawsuit in this area that I think is really interesting. So there's this company called CoreLogic that does background check software for rentals. And they were sued by a plaintiff, I think the Connecticut Fair Housing Center, for being discriminatory. Then, their lawyers kind of yawned and said, we don't make the decisions, we just make the software, which would be the defense that would have worked for 30 years or 40 years in the past. But the judge came back and said, no, that makes no sense. You're making all the money here, you have all the expertise, you are in violation of the Fair Housing Act, not your users. And so this case is sort of slowly moving through the courts. The courts in the legal system do move very slowly, much more slowly than AI. So if you're thinking, why haven't I heard about any of this? I think that's one reason, right? The courts are not, they don't move quickly. They don't care about, product velocity and move fast and break things. They just move slowly. Okay, here's the EU AI Act. I've talked a little bit about this, but I think here's the thing. Proposed penalties for non-compliance can be up to 6% of annual global revenue. And EU regulators are known to dig their heels in and really make this happen. And again, it's risk-based. What's high risk? And if you want to know more about it, you should read the annexes to the law. Of course, the law is nearly impossible to read. It's hundreds of pages long, but there are summary annexes that are sort of human readable. Okay, here's the NIST AI Risk Management Framework. If this is something that you haven't seen, you should definitely check it out. It's not necessarily like for frontline data scientists, but it is for sort of their managers and middle management. And I think it's not perfect, but it's actually a pretty good document. And so if you're thinking, what can I do to comply with these laws? If you're an individual practicing data scientist, you should be thinking about this, you should be aware of it, but it's really up to your management. And so if you want when the regulators come by wondering, you want them to think, these are not the droids we're looking for. The way you do that is you say, we are in compliance with the NIST AI Risk Management Framework, and they're going to go find people who don't know what the NIST AI Risk Management Framework is to bother. Okay, these are the 7 basic questions to ask yourself, as promised in the title of the talk. So, do you have outcome? And this really, in my experience, drives data scientists crazy. The law doesn't really care about your neural networks or your explainable boosting machines. It just says, are the outcomes roughly equal across demographic groups, no matter what the input data says? Okay, and that's a generalization, but it's roughly true in employment and consumer credit. Now, are your models performing equally? That seems to be a definition of fairness that data scientists like better. Do you have equal accuracy across these groups? And are you documenting what you're doing about this? Data privacy, is your model compliant with relevant data privacy laws? And I think the question for data scientists is, do I have consent to use this data? And is there a bunch of personally identifiable data in my training data? So those are big red flags. Have you applied what they would call reasonable security standards, like the NIST cyber framework? Have you applied something like that to all your AI systems? Can you explain how your system makes a decision? This is getting more and more important. You used to only have to do this in consumer finance, but like that DC law says, you should explain decisions across way more applications. The laws in California are about to change to say you should explain decisions across way more applications. So requirements for explainability are going to grow. What kind of sort of structures do you have in your organization? And that, believe me, the FTC and lawyers get really into corporate organization charts, okay? How does your org chart prevent people from making bad decisions with AI? How is your system safe, right? Can you turn it off? Are you monitoring it? Is there redundant functionality if it screws up? These are really basic questions that regulators are interested in. It's not rocket science. And then here's a big one to me. So I've never built an AI system just me, right? It's always consultants, and we buy some data, and we get some data, and we use some consultants, and we use some in-house expertise, and we buy some software, and we make some software. Are all those third parties that you're interacting with, are they doing all these things? And that's a really, really tricky aspect of compliance. So I think we're out of time, is that right? And happy to take some more questions. Go ahead. Okay.
Yeah, so in regards to question 1,
Mhm.
across different groups, I know there's like the option in a lot of services to like opt out of sharing information about yourself.
Mhm.
So in the case where people aren't willing to share information about themselves and you literally can't get information, what's like your guidance from a legal perspective to answer question 1 in that case?
Sure. So sometimes you just can't do it, right? And then you have to be more careful. But like, and I think this is always shocking to data scientists in my experience too, in consumer finance, in fair lending, where there are hundreds of millions of dollars of penalties if you're making loans outside of certain fairness parameters, they don't have demographic data. They infer demographic data from name and zip code at over 90% accuracy using Bayes' rule. It's called BISG, Bayesian Improved Surname Geocoding, and it only works because our society is so segregated. Your name and zip code, and it literally just uses census lookup tables and Bayes' rule. Your name and zip code is predictive of your race, over 90% accuracy. And since fairness is group fairness, we're talking about group fairness, we're talking about averages across large groups. It doesn't matter if it doesn't work for you or it doesn't work for your friend or something like that. It's been proven by armies of PhDs in the government that it works across big populations. So you can infer race very accurately from name and zip code. And there are other tricks like that. You can infer gender from name. If you add birth year in, that helps make the name inference even more accurate. So there are ways to infer it, and sometimes you are forced to infer it. But sometimes the law says don't collect the data because of number 2, minimize data collection because of number 2, and infer race and gender using these sort of tricks that are well known in the industry.
Okay, so great talk. I'm gonna give you a slightly convoluted question in the
Okay.
in the form of case study. Okay, so this is what some of my non-AI friends asked me during the pandemic.
Mhm.
Right? So some of them were day traders and following Reddit and whatnot. So one guy asked me, "Oh, Vig, smart data scientist, can you build me a bot, right? Subscribe to the Reddit thread, and if the bot see a pump, then tell me to throw in $500 and stay for 5 hours." And then, but if the bot sees that the news goes to TV, then sell it for me immediately.
Yeah.
Now, just naively assuming that I can build such a bot and it does work, right? Am I gonna be sued by any of these 7 things, right? So let's assume I can create such a product called Reddit pump detector, right? And sell it to 100 traders. I'm gonna be asked to take it back?
I don't know. So I would say what your main risk there, I would say, is along the lines of 6. It's like negligence, right? It's like, does this work? Does this thing that you're selling actually work? I would say that would be question 1. And if it did actually work, then I think you would be mostly okay. As long as you weren't deceiving people with the product, then I think you would be mostly okay. Now it depends how many people you're selling it to and all these kinds of things, in terms of how much attention you're going to draw to yourself. But which one were you concerned about?
So I'm gonna ask those guys to sign a waiver and say, okay, I played with money I can lose, so there's no safety.
Yeah.
Safety concern here.
Well,
So
maybe. It depends how much money is lost. It depends how much money. So here's the realest answer I can give you. So in the UK, a very rich person is suing a hedge fund manager for using AI to run their portfolio and losing lots of money. In the US, the SEC has taken on several cases where large investment firms replaced human traders with AI without disclosing that. And see, this one, like the regular, so in DC we have I did spend 4 years here in Silicon Valley, but in DC the mindset is very different. The mindset is very, very different. The SEC is thinking you can't replace your best human traders with crappy broken AI. They never once thought like AI is better than humans. They're like, you can't replace your best human traders with faulty software and not tell your customers. That's illegal. And so I think that's the best answer I can give is that even with all the disclaimers and stuff like that, in the UK, this rich guy is suing an AI trading firm, and because they lost a lot of money. And then the SEC has taken on several cases in the US where human traders have been replaced by algorithms without telling customers. So I think a key lesson to learn there is just tell people that you're using an algorithm. And that's another sort of prime lesson from the FTC is tell people when you're using algorithms. Don't try to trick people and think they're interacting with humans.
Great. Yeah, but this checklist is very helpful.
Thank you. And it's from the NIST.
Right.
It's from NIST. I think one reason that it's helpful and good is because it's checked against NIST. So, all right. Yeah, sure.
I get one more question. Have you seen an example of where an industrial AI ML model has fallen under the purview of one of these segments?
Yes. Yeah, I don't know if this counts, but this is what comes to mind. An Amazon warehouse robot punctured like a whole case of bear mace and a bear spray and sent like 40 people to the hospital. So that's one thing that comes to mind. And like a chess playing robot, did you see this? A chess playing robot broke some kid's finger, things like this. So yeah, I mean there's a lot. Can we go to the next slide? I know I'm being bad here, but just I sit on the board of what's called the AI Incident Database, and there's thousands of public reports of hundreds of AI system failures, some of which are in the industrial space. But most of, I mean, do you know how many times self-driving Teslas have hit cop cars? Like 3 or more times. Like I don't know, they're really drawn to cop cars. They're really drawn to cop cars. And yeah, so I would say a lot of it is about creepy stuff on social media, and a lot of it is about self-driving Teslas.
Yeah.
But here's a good sampling. All right, so I'll stop. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Patrick.